The Banking Scene Director's Cut goes behind the scenes, sharing stories and insights to help you build the bank of tomorrow.
So, Rick, you tackled a big problem, or a big
And complex too.
big topic, quantum. My goodness. And you were very brave at SIBOS to jump into moderating.
Brave, Andrew, or naive?
Well, I wasn't going to use that word, but you moderated a panel with a whole lot of experts on quantum. And I know you love asking questions, so that must have been great for you because you weren't expected to be the expert. You were surrounded by them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially on a topic like that, which is incredibly complex. But I'm really intrigued by the technology and its future. I haven't shared that with you, but I'm also attending a very basic course right now whenever I have some time, a couple of videos that a few universities from the Netherlands have been building to get a better understanding of how the quantum technology works. The people in the panel, they were more focused on the use case technology, software, and also there I thought it was truly fascinating that when they talk about algorithms, it's completely different from what we talk about in terms of algorithms. Because these quantum computers, they think completely different than a regular computer. It's not that they just calculate much faster, but the way they calculate is also different because of the quantum technology. And that is something incredibly fascinating, I think, and incredibly hard to understand. I still don't understand. Don't call me an expert. You can ask me questions, but I'm not an expert in quantum. I'm just rephrasing what others have been telling me.
And I had a favorite quote that, came out of your blog. I'm not sure whether it was on the panel as well. And that was, quantum is not ready for banking, but banking needs to be ready for quantum. What was your favorite quote that came out of that panel?
I think mine was, quantum computing won't replace classical computing, it will augment it. The future is hybrid, classic, quantum, and AI working together. And coincidentally, that's also something that I've been discussing with Chris Skinner earlier this morning, where we're talking about the fact that all the hype technologies of the past 15 years all seem to be coming together now. We have there was that rage on digital transformation and fintech. We've seen that. We're going to next level with AI. There is the whole evolution of agentic AI, where you need to have that programmable trust, which brings us to the blockchain technology. With AI, we now start to investigate quantum computing and how that can be a solution to have a more sustainable AI that takes much less energy to consume, to calculate new things, etc. All that is coming together, and that hybrid future, and also the realization that quantum will not replace an existing computer, and we will not all be working on quantum computers one day or another simply because technology and the reasoning is completely different. That is, I think, very fascinating to follow up.
And I think that also came through. I had written a blog earlier on in the year, going back to July, where it came through very clearly.
Also based on a panel I moderated.
A panel you moderated at the Banking Scene in Brussels. And that was very clear that there is no quantum without AI, which again, I hadn't realized the intrinsic link between AI and quantum, that you can't really, I wouldn't even say program, but you can't really optimally use a quantum computer without also using AI to be able to handle it, that kind of a thing. What's the relationship in your understanding?
We may be mixing things up here. I think on the one hand, you look at the opportunities to make AI, to build more efficient AI solutions, more effective AI solutions. We may need to fall back to quantum computer one day. But quantum computing, to make sure that it gets towards that level of a zero-proof quantum computer one, where we can trust the solutions it brings, that requires a lot of heavy calculations, which is where AI comes in as an enabler, as an augmentation of the human capabilities today. Because what's interesting is I said that the algorithms for quantum computers are different than regular computers. And although we don't have a production-ready quantum advantage proof quantum computer, so a computer of which we can know for sure that it calculates faster than a regular computer.
Mhm.
We do have people, and I had 2 of them in my panel in Frankfurt, who are, their job is to create quantum algorithms for a device that isn't currently capable of calculating those.
It's interesting.
That is
So,
incredibly interesting and
so
all very theoretical, of course. But
yeah,
it
I was
also
going to say,
means that you have AI on the one hand as an output for quantum, but you have AI today also as a way to speed up the process towards the quantum advantage level of quantum computing, to make sure that it can finally start contributing to society instead of just spending a lot of research.
yeah, because I have to be honest that I have previously been sucked into a bit of the hype and the headlines
Yeah.
around quantum. And before our previous conversation that we had actually only just a couple of weeks ago about quantum and about the existence of a quantum computer, I thought that there was one in existence. But as you say, your
But there
panel
are quantum computers. They're just premature.
without a quantum advantage at the moment. And the reality is that I personally believe that it's the lack of concrete results at the moment that is making a lot of banks sort of distance themselves, or at least take this
Bit ignorant.
approach just to, we're going to wait and see. So I think that a lot of banks will maybe miss out on opportunities by coming late to the party, because they're going to allocate their budgets, their resources for POCs, their resources for experimentation. They're going to focus on the AI side of things at the moment, because that's the big hype. Who knows, in a couple of months' time, it might all be around stablecoins and blockchain that the next bit of hype is, whatever. But quantum seems to be that still that little bit too theoretical for most bankers to get their head around right now, unless we're talking about the threat.
Yeah.
Because,
that's essentially it. I think when it comes to advantage, as we've seen in other technology evolutions, it's not bad being a second mover, third mover, or
Fast
where you can
follower.
learn from experiences of others to do better at a lower cost. So I understand that not all banks are looking at the opportunities, but the threats are definitely there. And the problem with quantum is that we know it can potentially be devastating, having all your cryptography being decrypted in a glimpse of an eye. Potentially, but we don't know when that could happen. We have a couple of international big institutions like IBM, like a couple of universities and others, who are very public in their developments of quantum. But of course, we also know how some governments, some institutions may be much more silent in their developments until they have something concrete, something that works. And that's where banks should be very careful for, because that is a threat that is invisible. That is one where we don't know for how long we should anticipate. In the panel, they said 30, 33, 35
2033,
maybe. But you need to prepare. And that's an IT project. That's not a business project. That's not an innovation project. That is a hardcore operational resilience IT question.
And that was something, again, that I put a link from the Cloud Security Alliance, where back in 2022, they had started this countdown clock to their projection, which is April 14th, 2030. So theirs is actually quite a close
And
projection.
it could be worth looking whether that's still the case.
I did. I looked
it's
before
one of those technologies where every year they said it will take 7 more years.
Yeah. And so I double checked just before coming on this podcast today to see whether or not they had actually updated their projection, and they've still got it as 2030. So they're now on a 4-year something countdown and I think that they've been cautious, and they've been cautious on purpose, because they're trying to spur people into action because of this whole harvest now, decrypt later concept, which I'm sure that the majority of bankers or the ones that are working in security and fraud are well aware of, that the concept that scammers will be harvesting information now with the belief that those credentials will still be useful in 10 years' time when they'll be able to decrypt them. Less than 10 years constantly coming down. Did the panelists suggest any or give any concrete advice on what banks should be doing today to protect themselves?
I think that was essentially what the whole panel was about one way or another. And you can break that into a couple of elements. We've touched upon a few already. One is like build quantum literacy, make sure that the people involved in cybersecurity, but probably also much larger, get at least a basic understanding of what quantum computing is about. Start a post-quantum cryptography migration plan. So make sure that you understand which elements in your architecture need to be reviewed and see how that can happen, because we can already build that the quantum safe environment. That technology is available. So build then the quantum agility, collaborate with other institutions. And that was also a very open call to action we had at the Banking Scene Conference Brussels with Quantum Circle, Jan Sonk, who was there for exactly that reason. Experiment and strengthen governance and long-term cyber strategy, which comes back to start that post-quantum cryptography migration plan, build quantum agility, and make sure that that is a long-term cyber strategy where you incorporate also all the lessons learned from the collaboration with other organizations, whether that be financial institutions, sector associations, or even cross-industry best practices being shared in the context of quantum computing.
I'm going to go right back to the first thing that you said there around quantum literacy, because Stacey Jefferson on your panel had stressed the importance of quantum literacy, and he used a term that I have no idea what it means. His actual words, he said, you've got to be able to distinguish between a specialized quantum annealer from a universal computer. I don't even know whether or not I'm pronouncing that word right. What is that, if you know what it is? And also, what would your advice be to the execs and the banks? Should they go on courses like you're doing at the moment? How do they become quantum literate?
Well, maybe first of all, a small correction. It's Stacey Jeffrey, not Jefferson.
Sorry.
And the quantum annealer uses quantum effects to explore optimization problems, but in a narrow, specialized way. So that means that these qubits, and that's where the magic of quantum comes from, they should be fully entangled. And that is not the case with this kind of technology. So it's not fully entangled or error corrected. And a useful tool for research, they say, but it's not a machine that will break encryption or power trading systems. That's a literal quote from online. But essentially, it means that these things are very good to test, to prove of concepts, to improve where we currently are with quantum. But it's not the thing that will really drive the magic of quantum computing.
It's not the end
too
game.
Premature.
It's not the end game, but it's a useful thing to use for experimentation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I'm with you. And one of the other things that came out of your panel is when you had asked the panel what they thought about the need for industry collaboration, your BBVA panelists said, if we agree the financial industry is good for society, we must defend it collectively before competing individually. Didn't he go into any detail about how we should be defending collectively and collaborating?
Well, it's essentially what I meant with collaboration.
Mm.
We need to look at it as a non-competitive domain, a bit like fraud and other things where, as a bank, people look at us because we are trusted institutions. So that means that also in the future, we need to guarantee that trust factor. And that means that you need to anticipate potentially devastating technologies like these. Every bank, because if one bank would break, that has devastating effects on others. And also like building that quantum safe environment from a protection resiliency point of view, that is on a competitive edge. So let's make sure that we can cooperate there, collaborate there, share best practices, and make sure that the banking industry at large gets to that quantum safe environment where we then can start building for more going forward and potentially grow to that competitive space. But I think first we need to counter the threat before we look at all the opportunities. And countering the threat is simply much easier if we collaborate, if we share best practices instead of trying to learn it all ourselves.
So it's more around the collaborate on the threats first, which was his defend comment, and then we start looking at optimization and
exactly.
how we can get quantum advantage in other areas like algorithmic trading
You
or
can
whereabouts.
banks can already test in that space, but I think when it comes to building that safe environment where people can trust that their money is secure, etc., that is the basic prerequisite of banking. And I think that should work in parallel with all the with research and all the innovation opportunities. And probably it's also part of a different innovation department as well. So both can work separately, but when it comes to the resiliency, I really believe in the collaboration.
So still carrying on about literacy, I did feel very small amount more quantum literate after attending Andrea Morello's session, which I absolutely loved.
The very dynamic Italian Australian.
He's a great presenter, a great storyteller. He very much explained concepts in human terms, and
to a certain level.
Well, yeah. Before we even get into the quantum bit, when he was just saying, his session was called Lost in Translation. And at the very beginning, he said, our language, our everyday language, no matter what language that is, but our language is rooted in lived experience. When we have a lived experience, we come up with concepts and words to describe that experience, which is then easily transferable to somebody else through the medium of language.
Okay.
And he says, he gave a great example. Do you remember the example that he told about his Russian girlfriend?
Yeah.
So he had said that as an Italian, la vita bella,
Yeah.
So the beautiful life. And he said, he would go on holiday with her and he would go, oh, look at this, la vita bella. And he said his Russian girlfriend kept on looking at him with a puzzled look. And in the end, she got him to explain, what does he mean? And he goes, oh, isn't this life beautiful? And she said, in Russia, there is no concept of a beautiful life. So although you can translate the words, the meaning is completely lost because there is no such context. There's no lived experience. Now, that might have been her personal experience, and I've got quite a few Russian friends that would probably disagree with her, but it made us all laugh. And it meant that even though some words you can translate into English, it doesn't necessarily mean that the concepts translate. So that's where he was explaining that lost in translation is about the fact that quantum is not in our everyday vocabulary yet. And the best way at this point in time for us to describe quantum concepts is through the language of mathematics. And he went ahead and he gave this phenomenal presentation, mathematics presentation that involved vector mathematics that I almost followed. I was quite
almost because it's through that session that I learned that you are a mathematician as well. So I was hoping that you could summarize it in an understandable way for the audience.
I got right up to the last bit, and I have actually drafted a blog, but I've left out all the mathematics because the mathematics were, when he described it and he showed us the concept of quantum entanglement, proved or disproved, whichever way you want to view it, through the language of vector maths, because he articulated quite clearly how how quantum entanglement looks, because a thing has to be both the same, two different things at the same time for the maths to work. So therefore it's either proved or disproved in whichever way you get, which is a bit of the paradox of quantum computing. And he also, he went on to explain how even Albert Einstein had considered the concept of quantum spooky. And he said that hasn't helped if a lot of people think, well, if Einstein thinks that quantum is spooky.
Well, it's essentially about like, we can look in that dimension, we can look in that dimension, we can look in that dimension, but then you can also have a fourth dimension. And that's the moment where you need to start looking at the other vectors to get an understanding of where that is. One cannot live without the other, and we don't have an understanding of that fourth dimension simply because we don't live in that world.
So you had the pleasure of having breakfast with Andrea. Did you gain any insights from him that he didn't share on stage during that session?
Gonna be honest, that was early. And that was after a very short night. But we were more slow discussing the items that we have been discussing here about the fact that we miss the language. His expertise is building the computers. So we also share a bit of like where apparently he also lived in Belgium and in Netherlands. So he's been traveling across the world for all kinds of reasons. So it's more a personal conversation, but by hearing a couple of the concepts of quantum computing being repeated over and over again, that helped me better understand some of the fundamentals that I needed to better moderate the panel session that I had afterwards. But to point to certain specifics from that breakfast, very hard to say.
Okay. Well, to bring this to a close, actually, you've just mentioned the concepts and preparing and moderating the sessions. As a non-expert, so I'm not trying to ask you a technical question here, Rick, but as a non-expert, did preparing for and moderating those sessions change your own views in any way on either the timeline or the impact of quantum computing on our industry?
Absolutely. The fact that I could raise the questions also meant that I could create my own context in those other people giving advice. For example, the fact that, that's what I learned from Andrea, the fact that you need to translate the data that goes from the computer to the quantum computer and back. That was something that was new for me because both computers don't understand each other's language. So you need a translator somewhere in between. The fact that algorithms on a quantum computer have a completely different structure or something than on regular computers, that was new for me. The fact that I could raise a couple of press articles from recent developments in the quantum space that are very easily put as a drastic next step in the evolution towards quantum computing, that you have experts to counter that and be much more moderate about the value of those developments. That's absolutely something that I take away for the rest of my life. It got me much more curious about quantum computing as well. So in that respect, a very good opportunity for me to get another stage at SIBOS, but a tremendous opportunity of having the chance to talk to these experts about quantum computing and how it can change the world.
I think for sure one of my key conclusions was we need to have this on the agenda in Brussels and continue the discussion, because quantum computing is going to be impacting our industry in ways that most of us can't imagine yet. And we need to bring in those experts in and us ask the stupid questions on behalf of everybody else, or the naive questions, so that we can all better our understanding of quantum computing. So hopefully we haven't confused anybody through this, and they've learned just a little bit more incrementally, as we will continue to do over our journey.
But before that, we first have our art night, of course, in 2 weeks to discuss rethinking the art of the possible. It's probably going to be without quantum, although it would fit perfectly in the agenda as well.
We missed an opportunity there for doing that. Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.